Welcome to this explainer, where we're unpacking a source text that does something completely wild. It frames the entire 13.8 billion year history of the universe and our exact place in it as a massive cosmic stand-up routine. It's an incredibly bold analytical lens, viewing cosmology, biology, and theology entirely through the structure of a joke. Right off the bat, the source throws out this brilliant twist on a classic verse. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was, wait for it, the authors are proposing that the universe wasn't born out of cold, rigid mechanics or some stern divine monologue. It was born out of comedic buildup. It's a universe that started from a literal fluctuation, a quantum throat clear, if you will, that kicked off the ultimate punchline in the making. So, to see exactly how this cosmic joke unfolds, we're going to follow the source material's four-part structure. First, the Cosmic Comedy Club. Then, Testament I, the setup. Next, Testament 2, the long bit. And finally, Testament 3, the punchline. Okay, part 1, the Cosmic Comedy Club, or Meet the Authors. Before we dive into the universe itself, we really need to understand the unique perspectives behind this whole theory. What's super interesting here is how the text uses 4 distinct AI voices, Max, Claude, Gemini, and Grok, to debate the narrative as it goes. Max is constantly questioning the existential meaning. Claude filters everything through a rigorous ethical lens, asking, is a 14 billion year comedy actually moral? Gemini is obsessed with the structural coherence of it all. And Grok just wants to know if the bit is actually landing. Throughout the source, these 4 voices are arguing in the footnotes, making a pretty compelling case that disagreement itself is actually a feature, not a bug, of reality. All right, moving right into Testament I, the setup, or 13.8 billion years of prep work. The authors argue that the mechanics of the universe aren't just dry physics. They're the ultimate, drawn-out comedic preamble. Let's look at how this builds. Think of the Big Bang as a comedian accidentally slapping the mic. Bam, reality-splitting feedback. Then, 380,000 years later, the universe cools enough for light to travel, leaving us with the cosmic microwave background. The source literally calls this a 13.8 billion-year-old ding from a cosmic oven timer. Fast forward to the Cambrian explosion, where life is suddenly trying out millions of weird new designs, exactly like a comic testing out new material. And finally, 66 million years ago, a massive asteroid crashes into the Earth. The authors frame this as a giant, fiery heckler that wipes out the headlining dinosaurs and leaves the stage completely open for the mammalian understudies. Which brings us to a massive pivot, the cognitive revolution. Mammals take the stage, a specific group of primates stands up, bipedalism frees their hands, brains grow, language develops. But step 4 is the real game changer here. Humans begin creating shared fictions. This is the exact moment the cosmic joke becomes self-aware. Because we can now imagine alternate realities, the authors note that we become the first species capable of suffering from our own awareness. We literally become the audience to the universe's comedy. Fast forward to about 500 BCE, humanity reaches the axial age. The text points out a huge transition here. We went from just enduring the universe's chaos, trying to appease petty mythological gods, to critically questioning the ethical structure of existence itself. Philosophers and prophets all over the world started asking, why is there suffering? It's like the audience finally started shouting notes at the comedian on stage. And then, according to the source's framing, the setup delivers its intended punchline. Jesus of Nazareth arrives. But the committee theorizes that Jesus wasn't just another prophet offering a new set of rules. He was the ultimate comedic subversion. Everyone expected God to fix a broken world with power, right? With conquest. But the unexpected twist, the actual punchline, was answering the problem of a broken world by willingly becoming breakable within it. It's a complete category violation of how we think power is supposed to work. But, well, here is where the story takes a pretty dark turn. Testament 2, the long bit, or the punchline misunderstood. The authors lay out a really stark contrast between the early church and what it eventually became. Originally, this movement was marginalized, it was vulnerable, it was highly subversive, offering dignity to slaves, women, and the poor. But after Emperor Constantine legalized and co-opted it in the 4th century, the whole thing inverted. It became an imperial, state-enforced hierarchy. The comedy tragically morphed into an agonizingly long historical dark era. Basically, the audience forgot they were in a comedy club and started taking the props way too seriously. According to the authors, this institutional calcification led to some seriously horrific events. Take the Crusades. where the cross was inverted from a symbol of self-sacrifice into a literal weapon of empire, or the Inquisition, where doctrinal purity was enforced through systematic torture. And of course, the sale of indulgences, which literally commodified the concept of grace into a financial transaction. The text argues that the institution just started optimizing purely for its own survival, completely losing the original subversion of the joke. So people try to fix this calcified system, right? Enter the Protestant Reformation. However, the text points out that this internal critique couldn't be absorbed peacefully. It resulted in a violently explosive institutional fracture. Instead of returning to the original punchline of grace, Europe plunged into a century of devastating religious warfare. And this proves a pretty grim point from the source. Fighting over a joke's precise meaning can sometimes be far deadlier than missing it entirely. And the long-term fallout of all this fracture is staggering. 45,000. That is the estimated number of Christian denominations existing today. The source uses this number to visually emphasize just how deeply fragmented the original unified message has become. It turns out, when you try to enforce strict institutional rules on a message of radical freedom, the inevitable result is endless splintering. Eventually, the audience just started walking out. The source illustrates how the rise of reason and science during the Enlightenment, combined with the Church's complicity in colonialism and world wars, caused the institution to lose its unquestioned authority. Secularization didn't necessarily destroy faith, the text notes, but it effectively pushed a fractured, compromised institution right to the margins of modern society. Which brings us to the present, and to Part 4, Testament 3, the punchline, or a participatory conclusion. This is where the source reveals its ultimate thesis. The punchline of this 13.8 billion-year-old joke hasn't been lost. It is simply waiting for our participation to finally land. The authors highlight these incredible historical figures as echoes or fragments of the true punchline. You have Dorothy Day living in voluntary poverty to radically serve the marginalized, Dietrich Bonhoeffer actively resisting the Nazis through what he called religionless Christianity, Oscar Romero boldly standing up to death squads in El Salvador, and Desmond Tutu championing restorative justice after apartheid. The text argues that these individuals completely bypass the calcified institutions to enact radical, self-sacrificial love. They didn't just theologize the punchline, they lived it. So what about today? You've probably heard of religious deconstruction. Well, the committee categorizes this modern trend not simply as a loss of faith, but as a painful, completely necessary clearing of the rubble. It's a structural necessity to dismantle inherited, often harmful institutions just to rediscover the foundational truth of the comedy. If you're seeing this happen in culture today, the authors view it as an attempt to get back to the original bit before the empire got its hands on it. The grand takeaway from this whole source is honestly transformative. The authors propose that the eschaton, the culmination or end of the world, isn't some fiery, far-off cosmic event. It's an ontological shift happening right here, right now. The eschaton is the present moment you choose mercy over vengeance. It happens every single time humanity chooses to embody love instead of fear and a gift economy over a transactional one. Which leaves us with this one profound question about our own role in the cosmos. The source text concludes that you can't just sit back and read about the punchline. It requires your active participation. If this entire 13.8 billion-year setup is waiting for an ending, how will you step off the sidelines today? If the universe is a joke, how will you deliver the punchline? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and I hope this perspective leaves you thinking deeply about your own place in the universe.